Hello y'all, welcome back to my channel. You are watching Shelly Flowers Reads and Writes, where I talk about all things related to reading and writing. I am Michelle Flores, and apparently I've lost my damn mind. Oh my god. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, in the month of August, the world-renowned, incredible, amazing, famous poet Nicole Sealey hosts a challenge every year called the Sealey Challenge. In this challenge, she pushes everybody to read 31 books of poetry in the month of August. So basically a book or a chapbook of poetry every day in the month of August. And that's intense. So I'm participating this year because I love a good challenge. I talked about this in a forthcoming video where I talk about my reading goals for the year. I need to read more poetry. Shockingly enough, most of the books I've read this year have been fiction, and I haven't been reading enough poetry for my own personal standards, so I want to fix that. So I'm going to talk about my TBR for the month. I have also gone ahead and made a bingo card. If you would like to participate with me in this challenge, please go ahead and check it out. I'm going to post links to Nicole Sealey's Instagram and her Twitter and any other information I can find about her. And I'm also going to link a bingo card that I made to help anybody who'd like to participate in this challenge go ahead and do so. Now, I recognize 31 books in 31 days is a super daunting task, but I think there's ways around it. And I also feel like this is a great time of year to help some of the people who need arguably the most help given everything that's been going on with this pandemic. So this is a great time to help out local bookstores, to help out local poets, to help out self-published authors, independent presses, people who have been hardest hit by the pandemic. This is a time of year where you can actually give back a little bit. You can also check out your local library, see if your neighborhood has a little lending library, which are those like donation boxes that are set up around in different neighborhoods. I am also going to be doing a giveaway for 4 different books of poetry. So if you watch this video and you'd like to participate in the Sealey Challenge, or if you would like to read a book of poetry in the month of August, make sure to follow me on my Instagram channel. I will post the books that I am giving away there on Thursday, July 30th. And basically, you know, depending on how many people DM me on Thursday, I will draw names at random, or I will just give it as a first come, first served basis. And then we can all be reading a lot more poetry in August. So anyway, with all of that being said, I'm going to go over my bingo card, and through that bingo card, I'm going to set up my TBR for the month because I think it'll be fun and it'll be exciting, and I totally won't regret my life choices after making this video. It'll be fine. Okay. So I have my notes here because I want to make sure that I get this right. And as you can see, this bingo card is quite extensive. I am actually going to leave a link for this Google Doc in the description box down below, as I said before, so you can check it out. I also made up these prompts very late at night at the top of my head. They're not perfect, but I'm trying to get as close to perfect as I can. I also don't know that I would have books that represent everything on this TBR, but I will also give suggestions for you if you are interested in that kind of thing. Okay, first up, read a book of poetry published in 2020. Unfortunately for me, I do not have any books of poetry that were published in 2020 that I haven't already read, but this book I talked about in, I think it was my May wrap-up, The More Extravagant Feast by Leah Naomi Green. I highly suggest, if you are looking for a book published this year, check this book out. Leah Naomi Green's voice is so powerful, and she does an excellent job of talking about nature and the body and womanhood and femininity all within this book. So if that's your thing, this would be a great option for that particular prompt. All right, prompt number 2. Read a book of poetry published 100 or more years ago. Okay, so when I made this prompt, I was thinking of, you know, this idea that books that are older are outdated and can't really be useful to our times now. And I actually kind of disagree with that. So the book that I am picking for this is So I found my book. It is The Celtic Twilight by W.B. Yeats. This book was published in the 1800s originally, which is wild. So I am going to be reading this. Now, I will say technically this is a hybrid book. There is some prose in it as well as some poetry. So I'm cheating a little bit with this one, but it's the closest thing I have on my TBR shelf to a book that was published over 100 years ago. So I'm going with it. Prompt number 3, read a book of poetry by an Insta poet. Let's see what we got. Hey guys, editing Michelle here. So I want to change the recommendation I originally had in the video and include The Mermaid's Voice Returns in this one. This is also going to be one of the books that I will be giving away this Thursday, aka tomorrow. So if you are interested in getting this book, follow me on Instagram, let me know, and I will be more than happy to mail it your way free of charge to you. Prompt number 4, read a book of poetry by a spoken word poet. This is the book that I'm going to pick. It is called Depression and Other Magic Tricks by Sabrina Benhaim. She is a spoken word poet, and this was actually published by Button Poetry, who is a publishing company that's really famous for publishing spoken word poets. I did not love this book the first time that I read it, but I'm wondering if maybe I give it a reread. If I don't like it, I can always unhaul it. If I do like it, then that's great, and I'm giving a book a second chance. So we'll see. Next up, prompt number 5. Read a book of poetry by an author local to your city or as close to your city as you can get. So I'm actually kind of fortunate in this sense because Jacksonville, Florida is a great literary town. There's so much good talent here. And I'm willing to bet that if you did a little bit of Googling for your own city, you could find local poets who are hawking their stuff. Now, the poet that I am picking is Jesse Cole. He is like, if Florida Man and Mark Twain had a son, Jesse Cole would be that guy. So I love his work. I've seen him perform at open mics around the city. I have read his previous work. He just put this out as well, and it only cost $5, and he covers shipping costs. He even signs the books. He included this little sticky note with a little note for me. So if you are interested in supporting this independent author, indie published author, give it a chance. His work is just so different from anything I've read in a really long time. So I'm excited for this book. Next up, number 6, read a chapbook or a pamphlet of poetry, meaning it is less than 60 pages. So for that, I'm going to pick this book right here. I actually picked this up last year. It's called Coastal Scenes by Steve Croft. This is technically another local poet. And I do want to point out, a lot of these challenges can be combined. So it's not as if you have to read, just like one of them. It's fine if you combine challenges, if that makes it easier for you. But this is the one that I'm going to read for a chapbook because it is really short. It's only 35 pages. So I know if I'm having a day where I just cannot focus, cannot read, I'll just pick this up and make my life a little bit easier on myself. All right, number 7, read a book of poetry by a Black author. So the one that I'm going to pick for this, this is a good one. I'm going to read for this prompt Muscular Music by Terrence Hayes. This is, I think, one of his first books of poetry. If you don't know who Terrence Hayes is, he is a famous poet. He's also a professor. I believe he was nominated for the National Book Award. Overall, his work is incredible, and I remember reading this in grad school and loving it, so I would love to give it a reread as someone who has, gotten older and see if I can get anything new out of this. Number 8, read a book of poetry by a Latinx author. So I am going to pick The Performance of Being Human by Daniel Borzutsky. This actually won the National Book Award a few years ago, and I believe Daniel Borzutsky is from Chile. He's also Jewish, and this book, I remember feeling like a lot of this book went over my head, but I also read this a couple years ago when I was just getting back into reading. So I want to give this another pass and see if I actually enjoy it. And then if I don't, again, I can always unhaul it. Read a book of poetry by an Asian author. So this one I am super excited about. This is Not My White Savior by Julaine Lee. I found this book, or at least came across it, when I was following Elisabet Velasquez on Instagram. I've talked about her a lot on this channel because I think she's awesome and she does a really great job of sharing resources and breaking things down in a very understandable way. So make sure you follow her. But she suggested this and I thought it would be so interesting. The description says Julaine Lee was born in South Korea to a mother she never knew. When she was an infant, she was adopted by a white Christian family in Minnesota, where she was brought to grow up. So I'm very interested in this topic because I am someone who has always wanted to adopt a child, but I also recognize the challenges that come with adopting children, especially if those children are of a different race than you or your partner might identify. So this will be a great insight into what that process is like, and I'm excited. Okay. Next up, read a book of poetry by a European author. So I got quite a few of those. So for this one, this is a really thick book of poetry. I don't know if I will actually be able to read all of this, but this is basically the selected verses of Federico Garcia Lorca. So for those of you who don't know, Federico Garcia Lorca was basically in the same school as Salvador Dali. I think they actually went to school together way back in the day, and he's like the poet version of Salvador Dali. Very out there with the imagery, very experimental, surrealist, if you will. And the interesting thing with him, one of the stories that has always stuck in my mind about Federico Garcia Lorca is when he came to the US, he visited Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance, and he came across a blues bar. And when he saw the blues performed for the first time, his first response immediately was, "That's duende." If you don't speak Spanish, duende has a couple different meanings. So duende can refer to little mischievous spirits like sprites or leprechauns or fairies, but it can also refer to this point in art where you feel like intense admiration and joy for a performance, but also deep sadness and pain, similar to what you feel when you listen to a really good blues performance. So I think this will be a good weekend book, something that I can just like pick up and read on and off. Or maybe this will be something where I start it at the beginning of a week, read it for a couple minutes every day, and then finish it by the weekend so it still counts for my 31 books kind of thing. I'm not really sure, but I definitely want to make sure I make time to read this book, even if I don't finish it, because Federico Garcia Lorca is definitely like almost like a Walt Whitman type figure for Hispanic literature, and I think it's important that I go back and study some of those classics. Next up, read a book of poetry by a North American author. And to clarify, for people who forget, North America includes Canada, the US, Mexico, Atlantic Islands, and the Caribbean. So, just so we're clear, Mexico is not South America. Mexico is still part of North America. You could even consider Central Americans part of North America because technically we're all on the same continent, but you know how those conversations go. So I am going to pick Equilibrium by Tiana Clark. She is an author from the United States, so this is perfect for this challenge. Read a book of poetry by a disabled or chronically ill author. As far as I know, I don't have any books on my TBR shelf that are connected to a disabled or chronically ill author, which is, again, just like a glaring gap that I have in my own readership and something that I definitely want to fix as this year progresses. Hey guys, so it's editing me again. I just wanted to let you know that I chose a book for this challenge, and I'm going to go with Neoteny by Emily K. Michael. She is a local poet here to Jacksonville. She's also an educator, and she is blind. So I think this will be really interesting to, one, get to support a local author, and two, read from the perspective of a blind person, because I am thinking back on my reading, and I don't think I have ever done this, at least not intentionally. I'm sure at some point I might have come across work by someone who either was blind at the time that they wrote something or went blind after they wrote something, but I think being more intentional about reading from different perspectives is really important and something I'm actively working on. So I'm excited to dive into more of her work. And I also just love supporting local authors. So back at you. Okay, next up, number 13, read a book of poetry by an undocumented or formerly undocumented poet. The only book I have that I know of is this book right here, Intergalactic Travels by Alan Pelaez Lopez. You guys have heard me talk about this book ad nauseum, and I am bringing it up again. I am seeing this as another gap in my readership. I need to buy more books from undocumented people, so I'm gonna do some research and find a new book. I love this book so much, but I actually just read this a couple months ago, and I want to give myself some time before I reread it. So maybe next year I'll do this for the Sealey Challenge, but for this year I want to try and find a different undocumented author. Hello again. So I do apologize about all these interjections. As I'm editing, I realized I could have picked bigger books, but anyway. I found a different book that I think I'm going to enjoy. It's called The Ghost Wife by Esther Lynn, who is a formerly undocumented poet, originally from Brazil. She is also Asian and Latinx, so that is a perspective that I haven't read that much from at all. So I think that will work for this particular challenge. Read a book of poetry written for children. Okay, so this has been a book that is sitting on my TBR shelf forever, and I'm glad I finally get to put it to good use. Famous Poets for Young People by Laura Benet, and it has a bunch of different authors, so it's technically an anthology. This was put together in the 60s, so I'd be interested to see who are the poets for young people in the 60s. This might need to be another weekend book because it's a little bit of a chunker, but yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm very interested in comparing work that was considered good back then to now, because I think our aesthetics have changed so much and we've really opened up to other perspectives and other points of view, whereas before it was definitely a primarily like European, white European lens that we were experiencing literature. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Read a book of poetry by an author from Oceania. So I actually do not have a book of poetry by an author from Oceania. Again, I read primarily North American, European, and South American authors and Caribbean authors. I don't read books from people in the Southern Hemisphere unless it's Latin America. That's a huge gap in my knowledge. So I'm gonna do some research. Editing Michelle is gonna come back with a prompt, and hopefully she'd be able to get a book that fits this prompt in the month of August and let you guys know a suggestion for this particular prompt. Hello again. So I am going to be reading Fale Aita / Spirit House by Tusiana Ivia. And I deeply apologize if I'm butchering that name. I had to do some digging and I found this particular book, but I am going to try and read it this month. She is an author from New Zealand, so that'll be a good read, and I believe she's also an Aboriginal person, so that is also a really good perspective. And yeah, I'm totally new to this part of the literary world, literally and figuratively, so I am excited to learn more. Number 16, read a book of poetry by an Indigenous poet. So I want to clarify for this prompt, I do not just mean Indigenous to the United States. I do not just mean Indigenous to North America. I mean Indigenous to any part of the world, whether you are an Indigenous person from Norway, from Japan, from Oceania, from Africa. You know, I think it's important that we broaden our understanding of what Indigenous means, and we make space for people who identify as Indigenous and also support them in their work. So for this prompt, I'm going to reread The Gift of the Hawk by Randy Lundy. He is a First Nations poet, and I read this last year. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really beautiful, so this will be a great reread for me this year. Number 17, read a book of poetry that includes illustrations. Okay. Here's the deal. I have this book of poetry here from my best friend. She gave it to me as a gift. It is called Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. I don't want to get into the semantics of reading Insta poets and the merit of that because I think there is a place for it. However, I am wondering if I actually like this. I read this at a time when I just had a baby and I was super emotional, and I hadn't been reading a lot because anybody who has kids under 3 years old knows it's so difficult to just find some quiet time to read where you're not stressed about your kid pulling stuff out of cabinets. So this book was perfect for that point in my life. I don't know if it still is though. So I would like to read this, and if I don't like it, I'm gonna unhaul it. And speaking of that, so prompt number 3, read a book of poetry by an Insta poet. I'm gonna suggest The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. I am personally interested in rereading this because I'm not sure if I actually like this or if I just kept it because I like the idea of having many books by the same author. So I am going to reread it and decide if I actually want to read this book. And then if I don't, I am going to unhaul it. If I do like it, then I'll get to keep it. So yeah, we'll see. Number 18, read a book of poetry by an author who practices a different religion from you. So I am going to read the selected poetry of Yehuda Amichai. So Yehuda is an Israeli poet and is obviously Jewish because of that. I myself identify as a non-religious person at this point. Agnostic would also fit for me. So I read this in grad school. It was really fascinating. And the other cool thing with this book is that, oh, wait a second. Oh my God. Okay. So speaking of different religions, oh my God, this is so funny. Okay. So I've talked a little bit on this channel about how I grew up in a super conservative religious Pentecostal home, and I just found one of the tracts that we used to give out to people when we were proselytizing, basically trying to convert people on the street to Christianity. And this is it. And I just think it's so funny that I found it in this book that's written by a person of a different religion. The universe, guys, the universe. So anyway, that's tripping me out. But I want to read this book because I do know that Palestine was just taken off the map from Israel. I also need to read work by Palestinian authors, and I don't know where to start. So this book will be a reminder for me. I'm curious to see if I can pick up on some of those sentiments, those anti-Palestinian sentiments in his work, or if it will be less about that, because I know a little bit about the history of Palestine and Israel, and this is a conflict that is both very new but also ancient. We will get into that in a different conversation. But if you have any recommendations for Palestinian authors that I should put on my radar, please drop them down in the comments below. Next, number 19, read a novel in verse. And I am going to recommend this book right here, The Crossover by Kwame Alexander. So this book is super cute. I actually taught this to my 5th graders way back in the day. It even still has their names in it, which is super cute. Even though they weren't supposed to write in this because this was the school's copy. But so this book of poetry is basically about a family. The father was a famous basketball player that played pro in Europe, and the sons are following in their father's footsteps. And it's all about family and loss and love and all of that amazing stuff. So highly suggest this if you're interested in a novel in verse, but want to do something that's a little bit different from the most popular author in that genre right now, who is Elisabet Velasquez. I think she has incredible options as well. But I do think there's other people who are doing this, so it's cool to kind of read a variety of that particular genre. Number 20, read a book of poetry that has been translated. So I actually have a few options for this, but I am gonna go with Pablo Neruda. So Pablo Neruda is so famous as a poet, and you know, just everything. He's like the godfather of Latin American poetry, and I read this in grad school. Again, I want to read it now. I think it would be really beneficial for me, and again, learning from some of these classics through the lens that I have now, I'm really curious to see if these classics actually hold up in our time, given all of the brand new understandings we're having about the world around us, or if they are tired and trite and don't really fit the needs of our world at this point. So yeah, we'll see. Next up, number 21, read a book of poetry by a neurodivergent author. Again, I'm in a situation where I do not have a book of poetry that I know of that fits that category. So that just tells me that I need to do some education for myself. So editing Michelle, here's your job. You're gonna do some research. You're gonna include that little clip right now. Hey guys, it's me again. So I'm gonna be reading The Divine Maze by Meghana and Chetan Junaru. I did a little bit of research and found out that these are two authors who are nonverbal, and I am very interested to read their work as a collection. I was able to read through a few of their poems, and I find the language to be really beautiful, and the structure on the page also looks very intentional and very beautiful. So I'm excited to see what their whole collection actually looks like. Yeah, I really gotta get it together. I gotta expand my understanding of diversity to be more than just ethnicity or race, and really start including, you know, ability level and neurodivergence and things like that, because I'm slacking. Okay, next up, read a book of poetry by an author younger than 20. I am going to go with this book here, which is called Emotionally Speaking by Kia Barlow. So I bought this book at the Jax by Jax Literary Festival a few years ago, and this was a self-published book of poetry. I remember thinking it was okay, but I didn't particularly love it. So I think getting the chance to read this again would be great. I actually don't know the age of this particular author, but I know that she was younger than me at the time that I purchased it, and I was only about 25 at the time. So this is like as close as I can get to this. So I'm gonna reread this, and if I like it, again, I'll keep it. If I don't, I'll unhaul it. So yeah. Next up, read a book of poetry by an author older than 60. So I have got an idea for this. Okay. So this author I actually took a class from in undergrad. Her name is Mary Jane Riles, and she was a poet of the Big Bend. So the Big Bend in Florida is like not the panhandle, that little part that sticks out, but like that curvy part that dips from basically like Pensacola down to Tampa. I've never read this book. She gave it to me because I did a study abroad program with her, and I took her travel writing class. I really enjoyed it. I thought she was a great travel writer, but I never took the time to read this book. And that's rude, because she was a great teacher. So I'm gonna fix that now. I'm going to read it. At this point, she's older than 60, so I'm counting it, although I think at the time that she wrote this, she would have been about 40, like in her late 40s. So again, close enough to the prompt, and it's a book I haven't read yet, so trying to clear off that TBR shelf. Next up, read a book of poetry by a member of the LGBTQ community. So for this prompt, I am picking Speak Low by Carl Phillips. I don't remember reading this book, but apparently I read it for grad school because I see notes. I said spot on here, so clearly I enjoyed this while I read it. I just don't remember reading it. So I am going to reread this. Now, Carl Phillips is a gay author. I actually don't know if they're still alive. So this will be fun to do some research on this author that I apparently loved when I read and completely forgot. That's grad school for you. Anybody who's looking for an MFA, you're gonna do this where you're just gonna read book after book after book and then completely forget about that author afterward. So that sucks. But I'm excited to read this because I feel like I'm gonna enjoy it. Number 25, read a self-published book of poetry. I know what I'm gonna do for this. So I have been loving Kay Spivey's channel for a while, and I actually had her book on my to buy list. So that's what I'm gonna do. I am going to buy Kay Spivey's book and I am going to read it, and I am going to read it for this challenge in particular. She's an incredible YouTuber. She's way bigger than I am, but if you don't know who she is, I'm linking her down below. You should check her channel out. She has so many great ideas in terms of writing and reading poetry and other stuff as well. So please do yourself a favor and check her out. I'm excited to read her book because I don't know her. I have not met her yet, but I think she's awesome. So that's what I'm gonna do for this particular book. Number 26, read an award-winning book of poetry. So I'm gonna look through my stack here and see if any of these guys have their little award stickers on them. Okay, so I could not find a book of poetry that fits that category in my TBR shelf, but this is a book of poetry that I've already read and I really enjoyed. This is The Last Mastodon by Christina Olson. This book won the Chapbook Award through Rattle magazine. So I remember loving this book and feeling like it just captured something really special in terms of combining science and poetry. So I'm gonna go ahead and reread it because I just love it, and I think because I've already read it once, it'll also be like an easy read if I'm struggling on a particular day. Baby, this a lot. Look at all of these books right here. If I push this guy out the way and like look at how many, and I'm not even done yet. Read a book of poetry by an author who has passed away. All right, I know what I'm picking for this. Mary Oliver passed away. I think it was last year or maybe the year before that, but I love her work, and this is Thirst. I remember reading this in undergrad when I was still understanding what poetry was, and I remember it speaking to me quite a bit. So I am going to reread this, and this is the only book of hers that I own. I have read a lot of her poems individually, so I need to make sure that I get more of her books because I think she is great at describing the natural world. I find that I actually really enjoy pastoral poetry, so I just need to get more of it. Next up, read a book of poetry by a scientist or someone in the STEM community. Oh, I got one. Okay. So, Ben Atkinson is a Florida poet. He is based in St. Augustine, Florida, and he teaches at Flagler College, but he works in the ecology department. He is also a poet, and I really love his work. So again, this is another example of someone who takes the natural world and really beautifies it within his work. Okay, next up. Read a book of poetry by an author who normally writes prose. So for this, I'm cheating a little bit because Lucille Clifton writes in a variety of genres, but she also writes in poetry. So I'm gonna read The Book of Light. Number 30, read a book of poetry by a deaf author. Hopefully this is the last one. So for this challenge, I'm going to recommend Ilya Kaminsky's Deaf Republic. I first heard about Ilya Kaminsky on the podcast Commonplace. And if you are someone who is interested in listening to more podcasts that interview poets or talk about poetry, that is a great option. Also, say hi, Roxy. All right. The last challenge, and the most important challenge, I personally think, is read a book of poetry by a Leo or a Virgo. For those of you who don't know, it is currently Leo season. I'm a Leo, and if you'd like to read a book of poetry, you can check out my book, Cuentos from the Swamp. It is available for purchase, and if you DM me on Instagram, I can also get you a signed copy. But another person that you could read their work is... Okay, so This book I read in grad school is called Supernatural Love, Poems from 1976 to 1992 by Gertrude Schneckenberg. So this is another book that I read in grad school, and look at this. I even did some little rhyme scheme analysis on it. Ah, so funny. Okay, so this will be another weekend book that I read, but I think it'll be super fun to dive into this again. Now, the bonus challenges. So to make this a full bingo board, I am including some bonus challenges. I'm including 4 of them in total because given all of this reading that we're going to be doing with all this poetry, I thought it'd be fun to include some extra challenges. Challenge number 1, write a poem, post it on Twitter or Instagram. This is scary because I know I'm the type of person, I don't like to post my work on Twitter or Instagram until it is time to actually like get it published. So this might be fun to just do like a silly haiku or something like that. Bonus challenge number 2, post a video of yourself reading a poem, yours or someone else's. So this is a little bit more lenient. You could read another poem that you really like, or you could post your own poem. I have done this before on my channel. I am going to link it above if you are interested in listening to that poem, but I will maybe try and do this again with another poem that I have coming out in a few days, I guess now, depending on when this video comes out. So fingers crossed. Then bonus challenge number 3, create a work of art based on a poem you've read. So this can be a drawing, a song, a dance, etc. This is called an acrostic, or maybe a reverse acrostic. I gotta look that up just to make sure. But it's where you create a work of art in response to another work of art, and I think it'd be really fun. So I want to see what people come up with. Bonus challenge, read a work of prose written by a poet. So a good example of this would be one of my favorite books that is a little bit slept on, and that is With the Fire on High by Elisabet Velasquez. I love this book. I think I actually love this book more than Clap When You Land. Like, I definitely think the order of her books is The Poet X, With the Fire on a High, Clap When You Land, and then her chapbook, Beast Girl and Other Origin Myths. It's like an amuse-bouche of what her full-length collection will be, and I cannot wait to sample that goodness. But this would be a great option as well. It reads really fast. It could be a nice break between reading all the poems, something you could do like at the start of the month and then just read it as you go, or I don't know. You can figure it out. You are your own person. You decide. You make decisions. All right, so that is it from me today. Let me guys know if you are planning on participating in the Sealey Challenge. I would love to follow you on Instagram or Twitter to see your progress as you go. I am so excited for this, and I'm also really nervous, and I'm hoping this doesn't end in having a huge reading slump. But even if it did, that's okay, because I have read more books this year than I read the past 3 years. So regardless, I'm gonna get a lot out of it. So I just realized something. I was packing things up and getting things reorganized, and I realized I had this huge stack of books that I'm gonna use as alternates for my TBR, because I don't want what happened to me during the reading rush to happen to me during this challenge, where I kind of just give up because I'm not liking the books that I'm reading. So I think what I'm gonna do is, if I come across a book that I really don't like and I can't get through it, I can't understand it, I'm gonna switch it out for another one of these books here. And the other thing that I want to add is, do the same thing. Don't feel like you have to be beholden to this challenge. I really do think the challenge is more about just exposing people to poetry more often. So if you're in a situation where you feel like you're reading a lot and you're not enjoying anything, just do something else. Read something else. Maybe slow down and instead of reading full books, focus on chapbooks, or try and read like 5 to 10 poems by a single author every day. I think especially if you're new to poetry, this could be really overwhelming and could make you hate poetry, and that would be counterintuitive. So anyway, that is my suggestion for today. Also, if you have any feedback on my bingo board, please let me know. I recognize that my perspective on things is really limited, and I have a bias that I might not be fully aware of. So if there's something that you want to give me feedback on or something you think could be improved, let me know in the comments down below. I want to make this as inclusive as possible, and I want to make this as easy as possible. Don't forget, if you want to participate in this but don't have enough books of poetry, DM me on Instagram. I would be more than happy to mail you a book of poetry to help you along with this. So let me know. I also have a bunch of literary journals that I can send out as well. So if you are interested in reading a literary journal, you can let me know on Instagram. All right, guys. That's it for me today. I post videos every Wednesday and Sunday, sometimes Friday. I also have a new chapbook coming out in the coming months called Memoria. You can find the pre-order link for that down below. If you liked what you saw today, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. And you can find me on all of my social media platforms as @ShellyFlowers. That includes Instagram, Tumblr, Goodreads, and Instagram. Did I say Instagram already? Did I mean Twitter? I don't know, but I've been talking too much. So, on that note, ciao, y'all.